Wow. Good morning. I am Jonathan Albin, and this is NycosRPG. And I'm wrestling with my screens here. Eek. Alrighty, so welcome to NycosRPG. If you haven't been with us before, I appreciate you being here. We are today talking about shopping sprees, and in particular, I'm going to talk about some ways that you can make the gameplay experience so much more useful for your players. And the first of those will be to stop my music. All right. So when you have a games group that is going to go on a shopping spree, go into town and buy things, have an idea of what their purchase plans are. Perhaps having them give you a list of which vendors they're going to approach. Now, many of us don't create anything other than window dressing for our shops and our stores, so perhaps you don't have a direct NPC built out for that role. Just realize that in certain cases, the non-adjoined persons that the players interact with are simply just there to do their job. They're there to sell stuff. And if they are not a story NPC, if they are not instrumental to the development of the tale that you're telling, then certainly you can make it as perfunctory as it's going to cost you this much and buy and sell the items. But that's really not fun. So let's talk today about some ways you can make your game sessions more than what you've had done before. First thing to think about is the very products that they're looking for. Why are they looking for those items? For example, if they are readying themselves to go into a martial encounter, how many other people in the community are doing the same thing? The concepts that we here in modern world face caused us to have to worry about things like how much toilet paper was available, how much tissue paper was available in a community, simply because there were people that were like us, worried about whether or not we would have enough. And so people began hoarding. Well, that would be the case also in a military situation where if everybody is gearing up for warfare, then the access to previously built or previously made arrows, bows, and such like might be at a premium. That means there might be a higher cost. Maybe there's a shortage. When you are playing the vendors, therefore, realize that the vendors are under those same pressures, and so they have to consider whether or not they can support the idea of the sales of those items. What this means is that if for example, a vendor knows that he's running out of arrows, he may stop selling arrows early. That means he doesn't mean that he runs out. He may have a store of them, but he might be holding those back for the idea of premium pricing, changing the value of them in the next day or so. And so the idea of the players intimidating the vendor, you have to really hold on to that concept of the vendor being a real being. He's a living, breathing being, so that the interaction with him feels more real. Granted, the mechanism that most game systems now use for non-player characters fundamentally whitewash them into background and window dressing, and while allowing them to be punching bags from time to time might be a useful thing, but the reality is that if a vendor is a real being, then he's going to be defending his business and protecting himself to the degree that he needs to, including, for example, reporting to the authorities if somebody does incite or bully him, so that therefore your games group can find themselves on the wrong side of the law simply by over intimidating an NPC because they are not perceiving of your non-enjoined players as being valid or useful or alive. And so you kind of have to help regulate that. Another thing that is useful is have random bits of information that are useful to the player be accessible from the marketplace. Not everybody knows everything, but there's certainly in an area where there's a lot of drama and danger and such like, there will be a lot of what's colloquially known as scuttlebutt floating around. There will be bits and bits of information that the players can pick up on if they are in the marketplace that they may not have found elsewhere. Also realize that the persons that are providing the information are going to be providing it from their perspective. So maybe they don't have all the information because they don't really care, or perhaps they know more than they're saying because they're involved. And so therefore there might be some role play aspects that you may want to include or consider in that relationship. This is also most commonly where your non-enjoined players, your NPCs, will move into the recurring standpoint. If you go into the marketplace and every Tuesday there's a guy there that sells rutabagas, then you know that the Tuesday rutabaga guy is going to be there, and therefore he becomes something that's part of the rhythm of the game, and therefore becomes a more credible source. So that in 3 or 4 weeks, when you have determined that he's no longer useful and he's no longer available, now that leads the players to want to interact and try to find out what happened to that rutabaga guy. These are all elements that allow for a broadening and a deepening of the roleplay experience overall, so that your players feel like the adventure has more value. Additionally, perhaps this will be an opportunity for you to bring information or assets into the game that would have otherwise not been available. So the idea of a person who works in a little bit of gray market, black market, might be bringing certain contraband in, which then builds itself into a story element. There's literally 1,000 different ways to consider doing this, but the idea of, for example, a caravan wagon that only appears every month or so, coming from a certain town, now has access to weapons types that they haven't had before. That begs the question, what has happened in that area that has caused there to be these new weapons, and therefore why does he have them and why are they available to the consumer? And so all of these options really drive forward the idea that you, as the arbitrator, are giving the players more than just a rote hand waving of the purchase of items. Furthermore, you can introduce story PCs by having them be, for example, the itinerant marketplace buyer who's come into town, who you've never seen before, and now he's buying up all of brand X, whatever. And the idea is that these things all create hooks that the players will play off of. The idea is you want to make the marketplace experience as normal as riding a bike, so to speak, but also to be as unique as you need it to be for the story to be amplified. I want to thank you for being with us today. If you like what you've seen, make sure you like and follow and subscribe. And if you want to know more, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Nykos. You can be part of our community and actually play with us in our live stream games, the online games on Saturdays and Sundays that way. More information, check that out, patreon.com. I will see you in the next episode. I'm Jonathan Albin, NycosRPG.